Dun, 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 dun. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum. Yeah, sorry, copyright, can't sing that song. Okay, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to another wonderful episode of FIM, except this week we're taking another route. We are going to be diving into a new section of FIM of what we are going to be calling simply Dynamo. Ooh, let's add some light to this situation. Look at that face. All right, so before we get into this, this is the very first episode of Simply Dynamo. So let's be clear, Dynamo is not for everyone. Dynamo is a very tough program to start at the beginning, but it's much easier than learning programming from scratch. So if you are a Revit aficionado and you really love how Revit's going and you catch on very quickly and you're able to do things with logic and whatnot, then this is going to be fairly simple for you. However, if your process in Revit is very scattered and you weren't very good at calculus or problem solving growing up, this might not be for you. You might be more considered towards the Dynamo play, the usable function. So, take this with a grain of salt. Dynamo has some really good functionality. And I am going to show you kind of some best case uses for this software and an explanation as to what Dynamo actually is. So let's get into this. I'm going to go to my Dynamo screen here. So let's have a look here. Dynamo. Let's go back back to the beginning. So what exactly is Dynamo? Well, Dynamo, in a very small nutshell, is a visual programming software. It is built into Revit and many other Autodesk applications. And it's a series of boxes and wires that are put together to create custom commands for Revit. Awesome, right? Dynamo, yay! So what is it? Visual programming tool that allows Revit users, in this case, we're going to be concentrating mostly on Dynamo for Revit, to create their own time-saving commands. So it's already involved or inside of Revit, so you don't have to pay for it. It is part of the Revit software. Okay. And if you're utilizing BIM, it allows you to customize your own workflows, which is super, super cool. So what would I say the top 5 uses for Dynamo? And some of you may recognize this presentation. We used it as the Swiss Army knife for architects presentation at CanBIM a few years back. We did that one with Jasper from Adamson Architects. It was a fun presentation. So what are those 5 uses for Dynamo Studio? Well, number 1, Bim Management. Bim Management is a very, very useful tool. We'll get into why. Microsoft Excel, if you want to data import and export. It does great with databases. Anything having to do with CSV or Excel or any data interoperability. It's a good way to reach in, grab the information, and push it back. External model adoption, so it works well with different types of external model integrations. Computational design, which is a very popular one. And construction documentation automation. Wow, that's a tongue twister. So lots of really cool stuff. There's a 6th one that I haven't added on here, and that's Generative Design, which has also been added in. So lots of really cool stuff. So how can it benefit us for BIM managers? Well, you can, for instance, globally alter font settings. So I want to capitalize everything. Boom, click, done. Manage and review drafting standards, so you can create your own script to highlight things in red that do not belong, or you can create an Excel spreadsheet of families that are not part of your standard family list. So you can do all kinds of fun things with that. Mass amounts of parameter adjustments. So creating and altering an entire list of shared and project parameters inside of Revit, very cool. You can automate sheet and view creation and clean up models that, contain duplicate information. So there's lots of things you can do there. Excel integration, like I said, very simply, you can push and pull data. It might allow you to create model geometry such as columns, walls, floors, and beams, which you may say, why, Dennis, and how? Well, It's all data, X and Y values, and X, Y, and Z values. You can plug it into an Excel spreadsheet and have it do it for you. You can utilize room data from building owners, such as like PSOS requirements from government projects, to generate a project constraint. Those are pretty cool features to be able to utilize. And in terms of external model adoption, tons of different options out there, including Formit, which has Dynamo built into it as well, which is super awesome. But there's a ton of different ways to reach in and grab information from different Autodesk products. And not just Autodesk, but we have Rhino. You can reach in and talk to Rhino and Grasshopper with the Rhino tool. You could also, with the new Rhino 7 that's coming out, they have Rhino Inside, which is going to allow us to do a little bit more with that, and tons of other products as well. And then in terms of computational design, this is what you see mostly on the forums and stuff, or in the big presentations from Autodesk, where Dynamo is kind of catered towards visually. Yes, you can do lots of crazy conceptual design with it, but we're going to be talking more about the underbelly first, and then at the end of our Dynamo session, when we understand the underbelly, then we'll get into the more heavy facts, the stuff that, you know, really flashes and causes the really fun things to happen. They're more like a reactive computational design approach. So yes, you can create lots of complex designs using math and logic and all that fun. So construction documentation automation. For those of you who didn't know, this is exactly what I use this for. I use it for doing like floor and ceiling placement according to a room type, like custom tags from Revit model data. I can have it fill in entire schedules, room schedules and indoor schedules according to an expectation. So like I use this probably about 90% of my day and 10% Revit. And that's purely because I get a question from the office. They ask me, Dennis, I'm doing something. It's taking a long time. How can I do this faster? Well, got an answer. Give me about 10 minutes. I'll whip up a script and then boom, they're off to the races and they can do something quicker. So that's the idea about this. Like Dynamo, I would say the majority of this is for helping with your construction documentation to get you to that end result by taking all the little minute tasks that take a long time to do and cutting them out of your workflow so that you can do them faster. So how do you start with a complex solution such as Dynamo? Well, little trust and a lot of initiative. Just jump right in. You got to take a risk, but hey, if you really dig deep and try, you'll get there. So identify any repetitive tasks you have in your office. That's your first and foremost thing. So anything that you're doing over and over and over again on each project. Take a course on Dynamo Studio. This guy is helping you out. Hold weekly meetings. Doesn't have to be weekly. You can set it up monthly or whatever. Create yourself a little committee. Talk about the things that are slowing you down. That'll help you out. And develop and maintain a script library. So keep a cohesive script library. You will have to maintain it and keep it up to date. We'll talk about that as we get into the actual class. And then when you have a script library done, you can educate the remainder of the office on how to utilize the Dynamo Play scripts. And maybe as they get more comfortable using Dynamo Play, you can start introducing them into Dynamo Studio. Okay, so there are so many more uses for a program like this Dynamo, so it's intended for enhancing your workflows and architecture. And oh wait, it's free! So get in it, use it, get more situated with it, because in about 2 or 3 years' time, Dynamo is going to be one of those things that were a segue into generative design. So get on board, help yourself learn some programming if you want, but I'm going to try and make this easy for you to jump into Dynamo, to make it easy for you to transition to the more complex decision-making processes. Okay, so let's dig in. First, let's do a little bit of a check. Ooh, I always love this little trippy thing that's happening here on my screen. Window within a window. Gotta love it though. Okay, so let's dig into Dynamo. So we're going to be doing specifically Dynamo for Revit. Dynamo for Revit is built right into the Manage tab. Now, there are two versions of Dynamo. There is a Dynamo visual programming tool, and then there's the Dynamo Player, which is kind of a simplified interface of inputs and outputs that is fairly easy to use for a newcomer. So we're going to be looking at Dynamo, and keep in mind that I am in 21.1. In 2022, there's Dynamo 2.10, which is pretty awesome, but we are going to be looking at 2.6 for now. So Dynamo. Now, builds are very important because the individuals that create Dynamo packages have to update their packages as Dynamo releases come. Some of them adapt as they go through, but you'll notice that some take new forms as they get improved upon. So this is Dynamo. Dynamo is a very simple interface. Notice right at the very front of your screen, we have your Dynamo primer. So if you're new to the software, like some of you may be during this lesson, make sure to click on the Dynamo primer and you'll see a history of all kinds of, easy to follow steps on how to get to a certain script combination. It'll also explain some of the nodes, some of the language, etc. that is used in visual programming. So if you are really starting out, click on the Getting Started button. It'll help guide you through a bunch of these ordeals. There is also a Send Issues button. So if there is something happening that's glitchy, make sure to use the Send Issues button and send it out to the dev team so that they understand what you're doing. We also have our custom nodes. We are not going to be getting into custom nodes in this class. In fact, this first class I'm making public just so anyone who hasn't subscribed can have a look at what's about to come in store. So if you're new, there are some basic scripts that you can see. These samples go along with the Dynamo primer. They will relay to these so that you can have those data sets on lockdown. Feel free to go dive into those and have a look at how they are put together. And that's one thing that you're going to find helpful is reverse engineering some existing scripts to get an idea of how it is put together. Okay, user interface here. So we are going to be doing new when we first start up here, but let's have a look at the top of our window. The top of our window, we have obviously our file. You'll see that you can export workspaces. So that means that the scripts that you show on your screen, you can export it as an image. It is suggested that you do this because it does keep a high quality JPEG of your exact workspace. Trying to do like a snap using your snipping tool tends to make it too grainy if you're trying to get some issues sorted out. So always make sure to do that. You'll notice that there's also an export model to STL. So for those of you who are 3D printing aficionados, well, that's your button. It's a fancy button, an awesome one. I do enjoy that one. So you will find that sometimes with Revit, I have a script that I will show you. It shows you how to prepare a Revit file for 3D printing, and it will convert the whole Revit file into one solid mass so that you can export it to STL from here and then size it into your splicing or into your slicing software for 3D printing. So in our edit tab, you'll notice that we have a few things that we'll get into later on about notes and aligning. I'm not going to touch base on that. Packages. This is the most important one. So there are a number of users out there, some of which you may see on the forums actively, such as Nathan Miller, Conrad Sobon, Zach Cron, Colin McCrone. There's a bunch of them out there, and I'm only naming a few that are very dedicated to making Dynamo work. And it's great to see. It is awesome to see that the team with like Sol and Moore from Autodesk, who have been putting countless hours into making this product much better. Thank you, Zach Cron, for putting all the time and effort into this. It's been great. So, packages. There are some packages that you cannot get here that you can only get on a specific website. But packages are a collection of nodes that you can use to help improve your Dynamo experience. Because, as fast as the Dynamo team is rolling out nodes, which we'll get into in a second, since Dynamo is open source, many of the open source designers are putting this up there free for your use. So a couple of those packages that we would be looking at are the Archielab. .NET from Conrad. Conrad Sobin, he's amazing at what he does. So we would be looking at downloading, and keep in mind the dates that you're seeing here. So we see like Dynamo 2.6, which is a Mandrill data visualization package. We also have this Dynamo 2.5. So for now, we're going to download Dynamo 2.5. It's already installed. Look at me. I'm already ahead of the curve. So things like Clockwork. So if you look at Clockwork for Dynamo, it has a 2.x beside it. So your build, if you are unsure about the build, just go up to Help at the top of your screen and click on About. And it will tell you your build right here. Okay. So Clockwork for Dynamo 2.x. You'll notice you'll see the build number on the right here and the date at which they stopped working on it. So you'll notice that if you click on this now, it'll say whether or not it's been deprecated or whether it's been stopped. Many of these nodes just kind of freeze at their current scenario. So it's up to you to maintain and watch how these packages grow. And you may have to update your libraries over time. So there's Clockwork, there's Rhythm. I will create a list and put it in the YouTube description of the most used packages that you'll take advantage of in Office. If you're MEP or Structure, there's a couple of other ones that are really good as well that I will toss up there. But for now, we'll just use the Archielab and Clockwork packages, and we'll leave it at that. Also, manage node and package paths in your settings. If you go down here, you'll see that you can dedicate a certain area of your computer to host as your centralized package location. So if you have a UNC path in your office that you want to put all of your Dynamo packages in, then you can toss them right in there and make sure that your users in your office are also pointing to that location. And then you can accept that as your destination. Okay, and you'll also notice there is a Generative Design tab. Pretty cool. You'll notice if I hit Create Study here, it'll go into the Generative Design tool. You'll see that there's some data collection. It always wants to take my data, and that's okay. You can take my data. And you'll see some fun study types that we get into. So Generative Design, we're going to leave that to the end. I'm going to concentrate mostly on Dynamo today. Okay. New. We're in Dynamo. This is exciting. You'll notice that all the add-ons and packages I have on the left, the Generative Design one is a Dynamo standard, so that one will stay right in there. You'll also see the Revit drop-down as well. Okay, so these are the two add-ons that you'll see as part of it. So I do now have the Archielab, Clockwork, Rhythm, and Springs add-in. I do love these packages. They are great, and shout out to the teams who put them together. All right, this is our Dynamo Interface. In our Dynamo Interface, very first thing that you're going to pick up on is there is this giant grid in the background that's 3D. And you'll notice that there are two buttons at the top left of your screen. If you hit Control B on your keyboard, you can cycle between the grid and your node space. You'll notice I can't rotate every time I right click. It's just going to bring up this very nuisancey window that keeps following me. I'm just kidding. It comes in handy later. But if I hit Control B again and I hold down right click, I can rotate my plane and see things in 3D that are happening in the background. So this will be crucial later on when you're working. If you hold down or scroll in your scroll wheel, you'll notice that works just the same. The pan is still your center mouse click. So zooming, panning, etc. all good there. And then Control B to get back to my workspace. So your workspace or your graph area is where all of our nodes are going to happen. But one very key point to do before you start any node from scratch. At the very bottom left of your screen, there is a drop-down. This drop-down says automatic, manual, or periodic. We're going to be focusing on manual and automatic right now. What automatic means that currently this script is speaking with Revit. It is going, and not just Revit, it's running a Dynamo script live right now. It is waiting for you to place a node so that it can live run it immediately. So what happens if you put a node in to delete all elements and then you forgot that it was set to automatic? Well, it's automatically going to be like, wipe it out, delete, delete, delete. You don't want it to do that. So when you are first starting out, we want a little more control so that you can understand how things are processed and how each of these sequences go through. So we are going to set that awesome switch to manual. All right. So we know our windows, we have our control, and on the left, we're going to get into the library. So the library on the left, whatever side that is, the left side of your screen is our dictionary and our display and geometry and all a bunch of things. So dictionary is a new thing that has come out to Dynamo. We're going to hold that one for now. But for now, we're going to get into some basic language and where to find things. So on the library, yes, you can go and click these little drop downs to find each of the elements you're looking for. I would strongly suggest doing this for the first little bit of learning Dynamo. Yes, there is a search function. It does come in handy. It is more intuitive now. But if you are to learn where all of the nodes are hiding, the best way to do it is to go through and identify where those the nodes are sitting through here. Now, explanation. So let's say, for instance, we're looking for a node, and a node is a piece, like I would say, a block of programming. So a node is a block of programming that represents a very specific command. So let's take a look at elements here. If I was to go into element and say geometry. So if I zoom in here, you'll see element geometry, and I click once on it and it appears on my screen. Well, this little block here that I can click and drag is a little block of information that produces one command that is acquiring the information geometry. So you'll notice that if I hover over and leave my mouse there, it says, get all of the geometry associated with this object. Well, that's exactly what it's doing. It is acquiring geometry from another element. So this is a node. This type of node is what we call an action node. And the action node, you will see, has a lightning bolt beside it. So the action nodes are basically something that is based off of a variable input. So it is basically an action. If you remember from AutoCAD or designing dynamic blocks, you'd have 3 steps. You'd have a query node, which is your question mark. You'd have an action node, which is taking information and manipulating it. And then you'd have a create node, which would be under, let's say here, let's go to Dynamo floor. The create node will have the plus symbol beside it. So we have a query, an action, and a create. So the create is the actual end all output for a physical or a 3D object or a certain item inside of Revit. It creates that element. So keep that in mind when you're looking for certain nodes, because it says points here, but it's not generating points. The question beside it means that it's getting information regarding points. So that is very important when we're doing our programming nodes. So let's go back here again. So let's say we have our element and we've got our geometry. Let's have a look at this node, so to speak. On the left-hand side of this node, you will see an input. This input right here is where you would input information. If you hover over the input, it's telling you from the Revit API, so the programming interface of Revit, that it is looking for a Revit.elements.element. That in the programming language in the background is what Revit refers to as a Revit element. Okay? So this element geometry node is looking for that object, that element that you have in Revit. The right-hand side of the node is your output. So whatever you end up taking, so let's say I have an object that comes into here. Whatever that you see in this little drop down at the bottom of your node, and I'm doing this by hovering over the node, you'll see null underneath because currently we don't have anything plugged into it. I can hit this little pin, and this value that you're seeing in this list, or collection of values, whatever it might be, is what will be coming out of this node. And if this is the very last node in your script, well, that's what the end result is going to be. And you can keep on adding more and more of these as you go. I just did a Control-C and Control-V there. And you can see like I can join these by clicking on one, output, and putting it into the next input. You cannot take an output and put it into an output. It will not allow you, nor is that practical. When you're talking code, you're going to go in one direction. I can, however, again, I'm taking this with what we call a wire, so nodes and wires. I am taking this node, Control-C, and pasting it with Control-V down below. And you can see I can use the same output to drive information in two separate inputs. Why would we want to do that? Well, I don't want to give it all away to you right now, but we are going to find out. So this allows you to create two different streams of outputs. So you may have, let's say for instance, in an Excel spreadsheet, you may have one set of documents that need to have a prefix for A. You might have another set of documents that have to have a prefix for M. So you take the same information, which might be floor plans that are named floor plan 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. You'd take that output of floor plan names that are currently in Revit, put it down here and another one up here. And one stream you would add the prefix to one of them, and the other stream you would add a different prefix to the other. So that's an example of how you would split outputs. So we have our nodes. We have our wires that connect those nodes. We have our input, and we have our output. We also have our watch drop-down dialog. So this is what we call our watch. It's just a momentary watch or a drop-down menu that shows us exactly what the output is showing. So very, very handy. If I right-click on this node, you'll see that there are a bunch of settings. One of these settings, you'll see says freeze. Freeze is just like you see on the old Mask movie with Jim Carrey when it goes freeze and everything just stops down the line. So if I take that node and freeze it, anything after that node will freeze. This becomes handy when you're taking a node up here and you want to do some test runs before it gets to this point. So if you just need to see some information, but you don't want to run the entire script down the line, it's always good to just take one of these, right click, and freeze it. And then when you've got all the information that you need before it gets to this point, and it's looking right, it's looking the way you want it to be, then you can unfreeze it, and then you can run your script as you would. Okay? So again, right clicking on it, there's a few different things. You can rename your node. So just make sure that you're being cautious about your naming. So you don't want people to get confused as to what the node actually is. However, it does come in handy when you're doing inputs and outputs and stuff like that. So you'll notice that I don't have an option to generate this as an input because it doesn't have that capability. However, you can generate these as outputs, which come in handy later on. So that is important for Dynamo Play and for various other software additions. So I'm not going to get too much into this right-click menu. Our next lesson will cover that. You can take nodes and wires, and this is great for those of you who are very organized, which you will need to be for Dynamo. You can create what we call groups. So if I select with a cross window all three of these objects here, and I label and right-click on them and say create group, it will generate this nice color-coded block that you'll see on those like LinkedIn forums and the forums you see on Autodesk, that a very clean workflow. So I could say this is, you know, option 1, renaming, etc. And notice I'm not really taking any nodes that make any sense at the moment. I'm just showing you how you can compile your information, because then you can take that group and you can copy and paste it down, and you can right click and change its color. So again, the right clicking does a lot of things here. You can clean up the node layout so that everything's a little bit tighter by right clicking on it. Now be cautious of that. It cleans it up, but it could be sporadic. Okay. You can change how these node wires are looking. If you don't like the curved node wires, you can always go up to your settings and you can change the way that these wires are showing. So if you go up to view and then connectors, and you'll see like curves or polylines. If you switch it to polylines, it squares it off. It creates this little bit more rigid look. That's all preference. It's however you decide. I find the curves to be a little bit easier to view, because if you start getting 30 or 40 down the line, you'll start seeing these things and your eyes will go cross-eyed and it goes crazy. Okay, so this is grouping. These are our nodes. These are our wires. So Dennis, how do I create my first script? Well, let's get into some language before we dive into that. Now, everything that you think you know about numbering and everything that you think you know about language in our English or whatever language you do, throw it out the window. We got a brand new language we're learning today. The new language that we're learning today is programming language. Programming language has a different outlook on how we place information into a file. So for those of you who used to watch the What's New in Revit 2022 or What's New in Revit 2020 or whatever it might be, well, there's a website. And on that website, you are going to be typing into Google, what's new in Revit API, and you'll see the building coder, the buildingcoder.typepad.com. If you go in here, you are now going to be looking at a completely different area of Revit that you have not touched before, the Revit API. The Revit API reads out everything that is allowed to be used within Dynamo or within programming languages, period. So as they release parts of the API to us to utilize for our own purposes, we get to do new, crazy, exciting things. For instance, one of the brand new API releases that just came out for Revit was ceilings. So we can now edit and manipulate boundaries of ceilings inside of Revit. And that is huge. It allows us to do all kinds of crazy things with ceilings. I actually just looked at a presentation today where Bill Allen was just creating a brand new app regarding ceilings. Check it out. Make sure you go check out that wonderful, wonderful functionality. So what I was saying, before you'd be looking at what's new in 22 for Revit. Now we get to look what's behind the scenes, behind like what can we do that's far ahead of what future comings are going to be for Revit. So we can design something before Revit even comes out with it, which is awesome. You know, this is the encouragement that I'm trying to get to people. So you would see that during API changes, you'll see that I have the ability to edit new unit things. I've got, you know, family parameters and definitions that I have access to. I can do things with formatting that I haven't been able to do before. I can change certain things with rounding and electrical API changes. And there's all these things that currently don't have commands inside of Revit or might not have commands that I can now build myself inside of Revit to help our team. So I don't expect you to get this all sunken in right now if you're new, but keep an eye on this, buildingcoder.com or buildingcoder.typepad.com, and keep an eye on what's coming out and what's new in the new versions. Okay, so why is that important? Well, it speaks to the language that's behind each of these nodes. So when I said hover over element, that Revit.elements.element is one section of the Revit API. That is an object that's part of Revit that you can have access to manipulate. So as they release new things inside that API, keep your eye on it because you'll be able to use that to program your own things. Okay, so moving on. Language. We're going to start with blowing your mind a little bit on what you think should be language inside of Dynamo, but it really isn't. Okay, here we go. So let's say I want to manipulate a word. And, you know, a word or text is something that we're very familiar with. Well, programming language does not see it that way. A text or a word inside of a programming language is actually referred to as a string. A string is text. So if you ever want to talk to a programmer and you mention the word string, they're not talking about fabrics that make, you know, your shirts and stuff like that. It's not string. String is text. So there you go. Just keep that in mind. And we're just going to work our way down the list here. The next one is number. So number, it's not widely recognized in terms of programming language. However, it's accepted from time to time. However, if we look at number in programming language, if I type it into the search option at the top left and click on number, it shows as a number in this node. But if I click on something like range, you'll see like default values showing on the left hand. You know, let's see if we can find one that's, what can I use? Let's use point by origin. Give me 111 up here by coordinates. Okay. So if I hover over this input, notice that in the input, it is showing the word double. So in a programming language, a number is actually referred to as a double. So in if everyone says like you're looking for an input and in the input it's saying double, instantly know that that is referring to as a number. A whole number, and that's a number that is just rounded to 1, would be considered as an integer. So I'm bringing back math to the team here. So we have our integer, we have number, we have our text. So we have integer, double, and string. Okay. Next, direction, otherwise known as a vector, and vector, otherwise known as a normal. So a vector is a direction of an object. It's a starting point with a direction. So a vector is something that you'll have to keep in mind. A line, otherwise known as a curve. So a curve is a line, more or less. A curve is any type of line that follows any sort of pattern. So it could be an arc, it could be a spline, it could be anything. It is a type of line. A curve is what they call it. So we have our curve, we have our normals, integers, numbers, and strings. We also have a Boolean. My wife, it drives me crazy with this. She does not like the word Boolean. I use it all the time. For years I was teaching Dynamo and I would say Boolean like 300 times. She's like, that's the goofiest word I've ever heard. But you know what? We love it. So a Boolean is an on-off switch. Otherwise, it could be on, off, yes, no, true, false. Any way you want to look at it, it is an on-off switch. So this comes in handy when you're creating if-based formulas where you need to determine if something can happen this way, then it's true. If it doesn't happen that way, then it's false. So these switches are very handy for doing something like that. And that is called a Boolean. Okay. And then lastly, we have something called a list. So a list, this is just to get us started. So we have our list. Lists are exactly what you think they are. It is a list of information. And one of the most important parts of working with Dynamo is list management. So being able to rework information so that it can move to the next node. So we need to be able to learn how to extract information to be able to use later on. Now, to keep things simple and to keep it in a base for time, I'm going to teach you something very quick that you can use for tons of scripts of your own to start from scratch. So we are going to back out a bit here. There are a ton of nodes to go through. I'm not going to get through all of them in these 8 sessions because there are tons of scripts out there, especially when you start adding new packages and they got like 400 scripts. So we're going to teach you a simple method to be able to manipulate information or data inside of an environment. So I'm going to minimize this screen here. On the back of this screen, under, let's say, the Annotate tab, I'm going to click on Text. And I'm going to type in a piece of text here. Okay. All right, there we go. We got a fancy piece of text. Now, there is a nice little rule that I like to follow, especially when we're first learning about Dynamo. If you want to create this in your head, one of the most important things to do when creating a process for Dynamo is to storyboard. So storyboard out what you're looking to do. Now, I have a piece of text here. This piece of text right now is lowercase and kind of doesn't make sense. But I do kind of want to make it uppercase at the moment. Let's say I have 500,000 of these pieces of text in my project that were never uppercase to begin with. I want to change them all immediately. I can do that. But I need to storyboard what I need to do. So for my storyboard, I know that 1, I need to grab onto that text. So I need to select text. 2, I need to change text to uppercase. 3, I need to push the change back to Revit. Okay, so we've got 3 steps there. These 3 steps here are very key to remember for any script. So if you can remember this, 1, get, 2, fill, and 3, set. This little combination right here is crucial to learning Dynamo at the very beginning. If you keep this locked into your head at all times, you'll find it a lot easier to work with. So 1, get, 2, fill, 3, set. Get, fill, set. And this will be the kind of basis for you to get started with, a number of scripts. So let's start. I have this wonderful piece of script here. I'm going to type in get. And in get, you'll see a bunch of different items that we have here. So I have get first item, get item and index, a whole bunch of things, but I'm not interested in the information side of it just yet. So I'm looking for get in the parameter. I need to get the parameter that's associated with that. So I can say get parameter value by name. So there's this one here that looks like a little cog with an element beside it. And you'll see get parameter value by name, and the lightning bolt shows that it's a Revit element or is a Revit node. So the Revit specific node, it means that they have seen this, they know it's an important thing to have, and they have made it part of Dynamo. Okay, so I'm just going to place that there. So I'm also going to type in set parameter, all one word, and you'll see here it's got that same little cog. So I'm going to put that in there. There's your get, there's your set. Okay? So then I need to select the text. So I am going to click on select, and you'll see a whole bunch of different options for selection. So I can select model elements, stuff like that. So you have to type it out. So I'm going to say select model element. I just need the 1. And you'll notice it has this little selection icon. So what I'm doing here is I'm storyboarding out my main items. I have my select model element, which is going to be this text. I need to get a parameter out of that element somehow by reaching into it. I also need the type of element that I'm looking for. Oh, interesting. Element type. So I don't really need the element type because I am actually clicking on the object, but for now I'm going to look at what it has to offer. So I'm going to click select for the model element. I'm going to click on the text, and you'll notice that the element ID, and this is important, the element ID for that object is what tells me exactly what it is being locked into that select model element node. So I can then click on run. And then when I do that, you'll notice that the element that it's showing now when I click that drop down is text note. And you'll see a little green button beside it. If I click on that green button, notice it takes me directly to it inside of Revit. It's an actual selection icon. So cool. So it allows us to actually zoom into the area that we're immediately working on inside of our Revit project. Pretty awesome, right? Of course it's awesome. It's Revit. It's wicked. Okay. All right. So if we were to take this element right now and plug it into this get parameter value by name, we don't know what kind of parameter we want. And if I hover over parameter name, you'll notice that it's looking for a string. Remember, it's looking for text. So if I was to click on that text right now, you'll notice on the left-hand side, I have a list of 6 parameters that are applicable to that text. And you'll see that I have arc leaders, attachment, top. Those are the only parameters that I can edit right now if I was to plug in a parameter name on this node. And the reason why is because I am actually extracting the information from the element, the instance element or information from that element. So in order for me to actually see what's going on here, one of my favorite ways to teach this is to go element.parameters. So element.parameters is a Revit node that allows you to reach into the element you have selected and see what parameters are available. So I am going to disconnect this little node here because I don't need it right now. And I'm just going to hit run. When you hit run, take a look at what it's showing here. So we have categories, we have family and type, type names, element IDs, all kinds of fun stuff. You see like telling you whether it's aerial or what the right attachment is, the design option, etc. Well, really not doing too much for us here, is it? So if I want to change something like it to bold or to into italics or anything like that, I need to get the type parameters out of this element. So I'm going to type in element type or type, bleh. And let's just see, I always get confused here. This is one thing that you'll see happens often. There's a lot of nodes when you get packages involved. So I can say element types, or I can, where are you? Doing stuff live, blah, element type. There we go. It's the one called element type, all one word. Of course it is. All right. So element, hit run, and you'll notice that it says it's a text note type. Okay. So from there, I can then take and copy this parameters button and plug element type in and run again. So have a look at the difference. We have our, I'll just maximize this just so you can see it. So I have taken the element, which is our text note. I've turned it into type parameters so that I can see what type parameters I have available to me. Let's have a look at how they're shown. So italics, you can see, is just a no or a yes. What does that remind you of? Very similar to a Boolean, isn't it? Whereas I look at something like line weight. Line weight is an integer. Then we have numbers, which are sorted out in our millimeters or whatnot. It looks like almost like it's a text, but it's actually a number. And then we have something like this that's text. So all of these inputs have very specific requirements when we want to modify them. Okay? So if I wanted to change all of the text of that type in the project, or all text in general, I can go in here and I can say set the parameter by name for one of these objects, and then I can edit it for the whole object. So do I want to edit just the one object I have selected, or do I want to edit everything of that type in the project? So that's a choice that you can make if you want, but just keep in mind that if you want to access parameters that are type parameters, you have to convert the element to an element type first. Okay. Alrighty. So moving forward, we said that we were going to change that one piece of text to uppercase first. Okay. Well, funny enough, if you type in string here, if you scroll down and have a look here, you'll notice that under string, there is an actual to upper button. Fairly simple. So I can take the element that we have here. You see this element here, it's a text note. Plug it into string and watch what happens. Nothing! Because there is no red value coming out of that element. Unfortunately, because of what is being read from there, you'll notice that I don't actually have the data that is involved in that text note. So we need to extract the value. So we can type in element value. I don't know if it'd be value. Element value. And you'll see there's all kinds of things in here. We got like string values, we've got dimension values, we've got parameter values. So like if I was to take parameter values, let's say, oh geez, what am I doing here? I am trying to acquire the text string. Dun, 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 dun. I'm failing us. Brain dead today. Okay, so we need to acquire the text out of there. Oh man, what's going on with me today? All right, so we've got element name, we've got element type, we've got element information. Oh, that's room name. We've got our, I can hear people screaming on the other end. That's not the right one. Put the right thing in. All right, so element name. Or was it just element string? Good job. Good job. All right, let's back up here. So we go Revit, elements. If you're getting confused, you can see we have text in text notes. This is what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for the get text button is what I'm looking for. If you ever get confused, go to the set left-hand side in the menus, look there. You'll notice that there is the text note, plug it into element. It will provide you with the string. You'll see here. There's the text that you see on your screen. Okay? Now we can take the parameter that we created, which was to upper. So it's string to upper, which we now have. And when I run, you'll see that the string is now uppercase. Awesome. And the last thing we need to do is set text. So we can take the set text and you'll see here, let's just move this stuff down out of the way. So the text note, and keep in mind there, see how it says revit.elements.textnote. If I hover over here, this thing right here, this element text note is actually a element. So we're going to take that element all the way to the front here. And then we are going to plug in our new edited value into the value here. So let's take our element type parameters away. Let's clean this up. So we have our get, our fill, and our set. Okay, so if I was to make this a little bit smaller here, make sure you do not have the text selected or anything selected inside of Revit. And then we go and hit run, and you'll see that it'll capitalize that element. Okay, so we have the ability to do that. This is a very simple node, but you're like, okay, I would have just capitalized it for that one object. I don't understand what the problem is. Well, that's handy for capitalizing one object. But what happens if that object is placed multiple times? How about all this other text that I have here that's all different text? Well, I can delete select model elements and go to the plural version of it. Select model elements. Click on select, do a big cross window select of all the elements I have there, and plug in those values again. And then when I hit run, no way. This is too cool. But what happens if they're on different views? Oh, that's mental. Well, I might have my work cut out for me. So if I was to go into level 0 here, select all this information, go into level 1, paste it into this view. How dare you? Okay, let's undo the capitalization. You know what? Let's make this even more complicated. Let's just, let's take all of that text that I just created and make it a different size. All right, so we have two different views with all different kinds of text happening here. Well, that's a pain. So what can we do? Well, instead of using get or select model elements, which is good for selection if you want to select a few things, let's delete that. Let's go to element types. And under element types, we scroll down to text notes. So we can do text note type or text note. So we're going to do text note. And then we're going to say all elements of type. So this will actually take anything that's a text note in our project, regardless of what the type is, and it's going to plug it in to here. So now what we do is I have text on two different views. They're two different sizes. I can hit run, and it goes through my entire project, whether it's this view or this view, and capitalizes everything. So again, I'm getting information from my file. I'm filling it with the information that I need to change it, and I'm setting it with a tool. Now, our next week's class, we're going to get into some more different iterations of this. We're going to start with strings next week on how to manipulate strings from every different variation that you can think of. Now, if you can just remember this one golden rule, this is a good starting point. So we can go to rename, or not rename, I want to group this. So again, selection, create group. So fill. We have the beginning, create group, get, we'll name that, color it to something orange, and then create group, set. So from there, get, fill, set. So I would say you can play around with a couple of different nodes, trying to extract some information, use the ones that you saw in the video, do some different alterations to that, change up the parameters if you want. Next week, we will be showing you all the different types of parameters. So like get parameter by name, set parameter by name, how to plug that information in, what types of action action items that we need to use to make that work, and then how to filter out different pieces of text as we need it. So this is a good starting point for now. Tune in next week. This session has been recorded, so if you want access to it later, feel free to reach out to me. Make sure to tell your friends to subscribe. We'll be getting more into it later on. So thanks again, everyone, for joining on and listening. This was a true pleasure, and I look forward to teaching you more Dynamo. So thank you very much.